The warning came from every corner of the galaxy. Written in 1,000 languages, transmitted through quantum channels, carved into ancient monuments, and whispered in the darkest corners of space stations. The message was always the same: never fight the human sniper. Marcus Chen sat alone on the observation deck of mining station Omega-7, watching the stars through the reinforced transparasteel window. His weathered hands wrapped around a cup of synthetic coffee, steam rising in the artificial atmosphere. At 53 years old, he looked like any other human worker in the outer colonies. Gray streaks ran through his black hair, and deep lines marked his face from years of squinting through scopes in different atmospheres. Nobody on the station knew who he really was. To them, he was just Marcus, the quiet maintenance engineer who kept to himself and did his job without complaint. They didn't know about the 27 years he'd served in Earth's deep space marines. They didn't know about the battles he'd fought, the impossible shots he'd made, or the enemies who still woke up screaming from nightmares about him. The Galactic Empire of Zephyros had never heard his name. Their vast armada stretched across 3 spiral arms of the galaxy, conquering civilizations that had existed for millennia. The Zephrosians stood 12 feet tall, covered in natural armor plates that could deflect most energy weapons. Their 4 arms could wield multiple weapons simultaneously, and their compound eyes could see in spectrums humans couldn't even imagine. When the Empire's scouts first encountered human space, they laughed. These soft, pink creatures barely stood 6 feet tall. They had only 2 arms, fragile skin, and eyes that could only see a narrow band of light. The Empire's military commanders filed their reports with amused contempt. Humans were marked as a minor species, barely worth the effort of conquest. That was their first mistake. Commander Kraxtor stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Devastator, studying the holographic display of human territory. His 4 arms moved independently, manipulating different data streams while his primary consciousness processed the information. These humans have only colonized 17 systems, his tactical officer reported. Their fleet consists of approximately 300 vessels, most of them converted cargo ships with basic weapons. Kraxtor's mandibles clicked in amusement. 300? We have 30,000 warships. This will be over in a single rotation. His science officer raised a cautionary appendage. Commander, there are reports from other species. Warnings about human warriors, particularly their long-range specialists. Superstition and propaganda, Kraxtor dismissed. What can one warrior do against an empire? Send the first wave. We'll take their outer colonies as a demonstration of our power. The attack on mining station Omega-7 began at 0347 local time. Marcus was already awake, sitting in his small quarters, cleaning his rifle. It wasn't a standard weapon. He'd built it himself over the years, incorporating technology from a dozen different species. The barrel was forged from Andromedan steel, capable of maintaining perfect accuracy even after 1,000,000 shots. The scope used Proximan crystal lenses that could zoom to cellular levels at 30 kilometers. The firing mechanism was his own design, so quiet it was practically silent. When the alarm started blaring, most of the station's inhabitants ran for the shelters. Marcus walked calmly to his maintenance locker and retrieved a case he'd hidden there 3 years ago. Inside was his real equipment: adaptive camouflage suit, breathing apparatus for multiple atmospheres, and enough specialized ammunition to fight a small war. The Zephrosian dropships descended like metal rain. Each one carried 50 warriors, armed with plasma cannons and molecular disruptors. They expected to find cowering humans hiding in their shelters. They expected surrender. They didn't expect Marcus Chen. The first Zephrosian warrior to set foot on the station died before his second foot touched the ground. A hole appeared in his head, perfectly centered between his 4 eyes. His body toppled backward, and his squadmates scattered, seeking cover. "Sniper," one of them called out. "Distance unknown." They were trained for this. Zephrosian military doctrine emphasized overwhelming firepower and rapid advancement. They activated their personal shields and began laying down, suppressing fire in all directions, their plasma bolts lighting up the station's corridors like a deadly fireworks show. Marcus watched them through his scope from his position 2 kilometers away, inside an abandoned ore processing facility. Their shields were impressive, designed to stop energy weapons and most projectiles. But Marcus wasn't using standard ammunition. His rifle fired rounds made from compressed dark matter, each bullet no larger than a grain of rice but with the mass of a small moon. They passed through shields like they weren't there, guided by microscopic AI systems that could adjust their trajectory in flight. The second Zephrosian died while shouting orders. The third fell while trying to drag his body to cover. By the time they realized what was happening, 7 of them were down. "Fall back," the squad leader screamed. "Orbital bombardment. Level the entire sector." But Marcus had already moved. That was the thing about human snipers that other species never understood. It wasn't just about shooting. It was about patience, planning, and psychology. He'd spent 3 years learning every inch of this station, mapping every ventilation shaft, every maintenance tunnel, every forgotten corner. The Zephrosians retreated to their ships, calling for reinforcements. 50 became 500. 500 became 5,000. They deployed hunter-killer drones, automated turrets, and scanning systems that could detect a heartbeat from orbit. Marcus killed them all. He moved like a ghost through the station, never staying in one position for more than 3 shots. His suit bent light around him, making him nearly invisible. His breathing apparatus let him hide in areas filled with toxic gases where the Zephrosians couldn't follow. He turned their own technology against them, hacking their drones and using them as mobile bombs. On the Devastator, Commander Kraxtor watched the casualty reports with growing disbelief. One single human had killed 300 of his warriors and showed no signs of stopping. "How is this possible?" he demanded. His intelligence officer pulled up archived reports from other species. "Commander, there are similar incidents throughout history. The Andalian Confederation lost an entire battalion to a human sniper on Kepler 442b. The Rigelian dynasty abandoned their invasion after one human sniper held a strategic pass for 17 days, killing anyone who tried to cross." "Myths," Kraxtor snarled, but doubt crept into his voice. The intelligence officer continued. "There's a saying among the vegan trading guild. A human soldier is dangerous. A human marine is deadly. But a human sniper is death itself, patient and invisible." Down on the station, Marcus had turned the mining complex into a killing field. He'd studied Zephrosian anatomy during his years in the service, knew exactly where their redundant organs were located, understood their movement patterns and tactical preferences. Every shot was calculated for maximum psychological impact. He didn't just kill them, he demoralized them. One shot would take out a squad leader mid-sentence. Another would destroy a weapon just as a warrior reached for it. He shot through walls, around corners, and once killed a Zephrosian hiding inside an armored vehicle by ricocheting a bullet through 3 ventilation grates. The Zephrosians tried everything. They flooded sections with gas, set fires, even considered destroying the entire station. But Marcus had hidden the human civilians in the deepest shelters, areas that couldn't be destroyed without rendering the valuable mining equipment useless. The Empire wanted the station intact, and Marcus knew it. On the 5th day, something changed. The Zephrosians stopped sending ground troops. Instead, a single shuttle arrived, carrying a figure in elaborate armor. Marcus watched through his scope as Ambassador Vex-High emerged, holding a white banner, the universal symbol of parley. The ambassador's voice echoed through the station's communication system. "Human warrior, I come to negotiate. The Empire acknowledges your skill. We offer terms." Marcus didn't respond. He'd learned long ago that silence was often more powerful than words. Vex-High continued. "We will withdraw from this station. In exchange, you will not pursue our forces. This is generous." The ambassador's words cut off as a bullet destroyed the white banner, leaving him holding a smoking pole. The message was clear. Marcus Chen didn't negotiate with invaders, but the real message was deeper than that. Marcus had deliberately spared the ambassador, showing that he could have killed him at any moment. It was a demonstration of power through restraint, a psychological warfare technique that humans had perfected over millennia of conflict. The ambassador retreated to his shuttle, and within hours, the entire Zephrosian fleet pulled back from the station. But Marcus knew this was just the beginning. The Empire wouldn't accept defeat from a single human. They would return with overwhelming force. In his hidden position, Marcus opened a secure communication channel, one he hadn't used in 3 years. The encryption was so complex that even quantum computers would need centuries to crack it. His message was simple. They've found us. Send everyone. Across human space, similar messages were being transmitted. On 100 worlds, in 1,000 hidden bases, men and women who had lived quiet lives for years began opening locked cases. Inside were rifles like Marcus's, built with patience and care, maintained with religious devotion. The Galactic Empire of Zephyros had ignored the universe's #1 rule. They had fought a human sniper and survived only because he let them. They thought they were preparing for a war against a minor species with inferior technology. They had no idea what they had truly awakened. In the depths of space, hidden facilities that had been dormant for decades hummed to life. Training camps opened their doors to recruits eager to learn the patient art of long-range warfare. The humans weren't just preparing an army. They were preparing a generation of ghosts, each one trained by veterans like Marcus Chen, each one capable of holding an entire army at bay, with nothing more than a rifle and the patience of a hunter. Commander Kraxtor studied the after-action reports in his private chambers, his 4 hands trembling slightly. 3,000 warriors sent to take a simple mining station, 317 confirmed kills, 1 human sniper. The mathematics of war had never seemed so terrifying. His tactical computers ran simulation after simulation, trying to find a strategy to counter what they had witnessed. But every scenario ended the same way. Unacceptable casualties, demoralized troops, and an enemy they could never quite see or catch. Perhaps, his science officer suggested quietly, we should reconsider this invasion. Kraxtor's pride wouldn't allow it. The Empire had never retreated from a conquest. Double our forces. We'll overwhelm them with sheer numbers. The science officer's compound eyes reflected doubt. Commander, if 1 human sniper can do this, what happens when we face 10, or 100, or 1,000? It was a question that would haunt the Empire in the days to come. On mining station Omega-7, Marcus Chen returned to his maintenance duties, his rifle cleaned and stored away once more. To his fellow workers, he was still just quiet Marcus, the man who had somehow stayed hidden during the attack. But in the encrypted channels of human military intelligence, he was something else entirely. The shot that started a war. The proof that humanity's greatest weapons weren't ships or bombs, but individuals with the patience to wait, the skill to strike, and the wisdom to know when 1 bullet could change the course of history. The universe's #1 rule existed for a reason. The Galactic Empire had ignored it. Now they would learn why that rule was written in the first place. 3 months had passed since the incident at mining station Omega-7. Across the Galactic Empire of Zephyros, military academies studied the footage, analyzing every death, every shot, every tactical decision. They called it the Omega-7 anomaly, refusing to acknowledge that 1 human had systematically destroyed their elite forces. Sarah Williams sat in a coffee shop on Earth's moon, reading the news on her datapad. To anyone watching, she was just another tourist, perhaps visiting the historic Apollo landing sites. Her blonde hair was tied back in a simple ponytail, and she wore civilian clothes that had seen better days. Nobody noticed the small case beside her feet, or the way her eyes constantly scanned the room, cataloging exits and angles. The encrypted message had reached her a week ago. After 15 years of retirement, she was being called back. Unlike Marcus, who had stayed sharp on the frontier, Sarah had tried to leave the life behind. She'd opened a small farm on Mars, growing vegetables in the red soil and selling them at local markets. But old habits died hard, and her greenhouse had a hidden basement where she maintained her equipment. The news reports spoke of massive Zephrosian fleet movements. The Empire was mobilizing on a scale not seen in centuries. 30,000 ships had become 60,000. Their newest warriors were equipped with anti-sniper protocols, randomized movement patterns, multi-spectrum sensors, and armor specifically designed to disperse kinetic impacts. Sarah smiled. They still didn't understand. On a frozen moon, orbiting Proxima Centauri, James "Ghost" Mitchell received his activation code while ice fishing. The 70-year-old man looked like any other retiree enjoying his hobby, but beneath the thermal suit, his muscles remained taut from daily training. His rifle lay disassembled in his fishing gear, each piece disguised as something mundane. In the asteroid belt, Li Zhou closed her repair shop early. Her customers would have to wait. She'd spent the last 5 years fixing mining equipment, but before that, she'd been the most feared sniper in 3 sectors. Her kill count was classified so highly that even she didn't know the exact number. Across human space, the network activated. They called themselves the Silent Brotherhood. Though half were women, they had no official recognition, no uniforms, no medals, just a shared understanding of what it meant to be death's patient messenger. Commander Krax Tor stood before the assembled fleet, his image broadcast to every ship. Warriors of Zephyros. Today, we begin the subjugation of the human pestilence. They hide behind their snipers, but we have prepared. Our new armor will protect you. Our tactics will confound them. Victory is assured. The cheers from 1,000,000 warriors echoed through space. They believed their commander. They had to. The alternative was too terrifying to consider. The first wave hit the human colony of New Johannesburg, a farming world with a population of 3 million. The Zephrosians expected resistance from the small military garrison. They didn't expect the hills to have eyes. Sarah Williams lay prone on a ridge, 6 kilometers from the landing zone. Through her scope, she watched the dropships descend in perfect formation. The new armor was impressive, she had to admit. Thick plates of quantum-locked molecules that could theoretically stop anything short of a starship's main gun. Theoretically. She chambered a round she'd crafted specifically for this engagement. The bullet was a work of art. A depleted uranium core wrapped in programmable matter, designed to analyze armor composition in the nanosecond of impact, and adjust its molecular structure to match. It wouldn't penetrate the armor so much as become part of it, delivering its deadly payload from within. The first Zephrosian warrior stepped out confidently, his new armor gleaming in the afternoon sun. Sarah's finger caressed the trigger. She exhaled slowly, feeling her heartbeat, the wind speed, the planet's rotation. Time seemed to slow. The shot was so quiet that the Zephrosian didn't hear it. He only felt a strange warmth in his chest before his redundant heart stopped beating. He looked down in confusion at armor that showed no damage, then collapsed. Panic rippled through the landing force. Their armor had failed. The one thing they'd counted on to protect them was useless. From 17 different positions, 17 snipers opened fire. Each had their own style, their own preferred targets. Sarah liked officers. Cut off the head, and the body would flounder. Li Zhou targeted communication specialists, isolating squads from each other. James Mitchell went for heavy weapon operators, reducing the enemy's firepower with each shot. The Zephrosians tried to adapt. They deployed smoke screens, but the snipers switched to thermal imaging. They used holographic decoys, but learned that human snipers could somehow tell the difference. They called for orbital bombardment, but the colony's planetary shields held firm. On the flagship, Krax Tor watched his forces being methodically destroyed. How many snipers? Unknown, Commander. Estimates range from 50 to 500. 500? Krax Tor's voice cracked. Impossible. Our intelligence said they had perhaps a dozen of these specialists. His intelligence officer brought up a new file. Sir, we've been analyzing human military history. It appears we misunderstood. What they call snipers aren't specialists. It's a standard training course. Every human Marine spends 6 months learning long-range precision shooting. The implications hit Krax Tor like a physical blow. If every human Marine was a potential sniper, how many Marines do they have? Active duty? Approximately 2 million. Reserves and veterans? The numbers are significant. Down on New Johannesburg, the Zephrosians were learning another lesson about human warfare. The snipers weren't just killing, they were teaching. Each shot demonstrated a new vulnerability, a new way to die. Warriors became afraid to leave cover, afraid to follow orders, afraid to even move. Captain Thexvar huddled behind a destroyed vehicle with the remnants of his company. Of the 300 warriors he'd landed with, 47 remained. They'd advanced exactly 300 meters from their landing zone in 6 hours. "Captain," one of his warriors whispered, "we should retreat. The commander will execute us for cowardice. The humans will execute us for stupidity," the warrior replied. "At least with the commander, we might get a trial." It was hard to argue with that logic. Across the planet, similar conversations were happening. The mighty Zephrosian war machine, which had conquered civilizations that had existed since before humans discovered fire, was being paralyzed by an enemy they couldn't see. But the snipers were just the beginning. In orbit, Admiral Chen, no relation to Marcus, watched the tactical display with satisfaction. The Zephrosian fleet hung in space, unwilling to abandon their ground forces, but unable to help them. "Perfect. Launch Operation Patience," she ordered. From hidden positions throughout the system, human ships began to move. Not warships. Humanity didn't have many of those. Instead, converted cargo haulers, mining vessels, and passenger liners emerged from asteroid fields and gas giant moons where they'd been waiting for weeks. Each ship carried a simple payload: a single sniper and a mass driver capable of launching them at significant fractions of light speed. It was insane by any reasonable military standard, but human snipers had never been reasonable. The first projectile struck the Zephrosian flagship's shield with enough force to overload 3 generators. As damage control teams rushed to respond, they didn't notice the small figure in an armored suit who had somehow survived the impact and was now clinging to the hull. Marcus Chen's cousin, David, had always been considered the crazy one in the family. Now, magnetized to an enemy warship with nothing but his rifle and a portable life support system, he proved it. His targets weren't the crew. Killing individuals on a ship with 100,000 personnel would be pointless. Instead, he aimed for something far more valuable: sensor arrays. One by one, the flagship's eyes went dark. Primary sensors, backup sensors, even the simple optical telescopes. David destroyed them all with methodical precision. Within an hour, the most powerful warship in the Zephrosian fleet was effectively blind. Other snipers followed suit, launched at different ships with similar missions. Some targeted weapon systems. Others went for communication arrays. A few of the truly insane ones breached hulls and continued their work inside the ships themselves. The Zephrosian fleet, designed to fight massive space battles with energy weapons and missiles, found itself under attack by individuals with rifles. Their point defense systems, calibrated to stop incoming torpedoes, couldn't track human-sized targets. Their internal security, prepared for boarding parties of hundreds, couldn't find single intruders who moved through ventilation systems and maintenance corridors. On the bridge of the Devastator, Commander Krax Tor realized he was losing a war to an enemy he'd dismissed as primitive. The tactical display showed chaos, ships reporting system failures, ground forces pinned down, and casualty reports that climbed by the minute. "Sir," his communications officer reported, voice trembling, "we're receiving a transmission from the humans. Put it through." The image that appeared wasn't what Krax Tor expected. Instead of a military commander or political leader, he saw a young human female in civilian clothes. She looked no more dangerous than any of the billions of non-combatants his empire had conquered. "Commander Krax Tor," she said calmly. "My name is Emma Chen. I'm 12 years old. My father asked me to deliver this message because he's busy right now." Krax Tor's translator struggled with the concept. "Busy? He's on your ship," Emma explained. Deck 47. Section C. You might want to check your water recycling systems. He does so. Enjoy his work. The connection ended. Krax Tor immediately ordered security to Deck 47, but he knew they'd find nothing. These humans, these snipers, were like smoke. You could see the damage they caused, but never them. "Commander," his tactical officer interrupted. "The ground forces are requesting immediate evacuation. Casualties have reached 60%. 60%? Krax Tor couldn't hide his shock. From how many enemies? Still unknown, sir. The humans won't engage in direct combat. They strike and disappear. Our warriors are. They're afraid, sir. They're seeing snipers in every shadow. Fear. The Galactic Empire of Zephyros had spread fear across the galaxy for millennia. Now, they were learning what it felt like to be on the receiving end. Sarah Williams watched the Zephrosian forces retreat to their dropships through her scope. She could have killed dozens more. But that wasn't the point anymore. The message had been sent. The universe's #1 rule had been written in Zephrosian blood. As the evacuation proceeded, she noticed something interesting. The warriors weren't maintaining their usual disciplined formations. They ran for the ships, pushing and shoving, abandoning equipment and wounded comrades. The mighty Zephrosian military machine had been reduced to a panicked mob by enemies they'd never clearly seen. The Silent Brotherhood had protocols for this situation. They could have turned the evacuation into a massacre, picking off warriors as they fled. But they held their fire. Let them run. Let them carry the fear back to their empire. Let every warrior who escaped tell stories of invisible death and patient hunters. Fear was more valuable than corpses. In her coffee shop on Luna, Sarah Williams packed up her equipment and prepared to disappear again. The farm on Mars would have to wait. The war was far from over. But the first phase was complete. The Galactic Empire now knew that humanity possessed warriors who could reach out from impossible distances and deliver death with surgical precision. But they still didn't understand the real truth. Human snipers weren't super soldiers or products of genetic engineering. They were ordinary people who had learned an extraordinary skill. The ability to wait, to watch, and to place one perfect shot where it would do the most damage. The Empire had ignored the universe's #1 rule, and now they were paying the price. But the bill was far from settled. Across human space, thousands more were preparing to join the fight. Teachers, farmers, mechanics, doctors, people who had lived normal lives until the call came. The Galactic Empire thought they were fighting a military. In reality, they were fighting a species that had turned patience and precision into an art form. Every human was a potential sniper, waiting for their moment. And moments, as any sniper would tell you, always come to those who wait. The Hall of Concordance had witnessed the rise and fall of 1,000 empires. Its crystal walls held the memories of every treaty, every surrender, every moment, when the mighty bowed before the inevitable. Now, Emperor Zalthax of the Galactic Empire of Zephyros stood in its center, his forearms clasped in the traditional gesture of supplication. 6 months had passed since the failed invasion of human space. 6 months of horror that had reshaped the galaxy's understanding of warfare. Ambassador Catherine Pierce stood across from the Emperor, looking remarkably ordinary in her simple gray suit. She was 63 years old, with silver hair and kind eyes that gave no hint of her past. The Zephrosians didn't know that before becoming a diplomat, she had been one of humanity's most decorated snipers, with a confirmed kill count that would have terrified them. "Your Majesty," she said calmly, "shall we discuss terms?" The Emperor's compound eyes showed an emotion rarely seen in his species: humility. The Empire acknowledges the wisdom of the universe's #1 rule. We seek peace with humanity. It hadn't been an easy journey to this moment. After the disaster at New Johannesburg, the Empire had tried everything. They'd hired mercenaries from species known for their combat prowess. The mercenaries had returned their contracts, refusing to face human snipers at any price. They'd developed new technologies: adaptive armor, predictive movement algorithms, even experimental teleportation devices. Human snipers had found ways to defeat them all. The breaking point had come at the Battle of Stellar Garden, though battle was perhaps too generous a term. The Empire had assembled its greatest fleet ever. 100,000 warships, 10 million warriors, enough firepower to crack planets. They demanded humanity's surrender, threatening to destroy Earth itself if refused. Humanity's response had been elegantly simple. They'd sent a single ship, an old cargo hauler called the Patience of Job. Inside were 50 snipers, and a message: "Take your shot." What followed entered military legend across the galaxy. 50 humans, floating in space with nothing but their rifles and specialized suits, had systematically dismantled the greatest armada ever assembled. They didn't destroy ships. That would have been wasteful. Instead, they destroyed capability. Navigation systems failed. Weapons wouldn't fire. Life support systems developed mysterious leaks. Communications arrays went silent. One by one, the mighty warships of Zephyros became floating tombs of confusion and fear. Warriors refused to leave their quarters. Officers couldn't give orders because their command systems had bullets in them. The psychological warfare was even more devastating. Snipers would sometimes board ships and leave messages. A playing card on a commander's chair. A flower in a warrior's bunk. A child's drawing in the war room. The message was clear. We can reach you anywhere. Anytime. We choose not to kill you. Today, Emperor Zalthax had watched his empire's military might become paralyzed by an enemy that refused to fight conventionally. The economic damage was even worse than the military losses. Trade routes were abandoned because merchant captains feared sniper attacks. Mining operations shut down after workers reported seeing scope glints in impossible places, even when investigation revealed nothing but shadows and paranoia. The empire that had conquered a third of the galaxy was being brought to its knees by the fear of a crosshair. Our terms are simple, Ambassador Pierce continued. The Galactic Empire of Zephyros will formally acknowledge humanity's sovereignty over all current and future human-claimed systems. You will pay reparations for the attacks on our colonies. And you will ensure that the universe's #1 rule is taught in every military academy, written in every strategic manual, and remembered for all time. And in return? The Emperor asked. In return, the snipers go back to their lives. The teachers return to their classrooms. The farmers return to their fields. The mechanics return to their shops. And the galaxy learns that humans prefer peace, but excel at war. The Emperor's tactical advisors had warned him against accepting these terms. They spoke of honor, of the Empire's 1,000-year history of never accepting defeat. But Zalthax had read the reports. He'd seen the projections. If the war continued, the Empire wouldn't fall to massive battles or conquered worlds. It would collapse from within, eaten away by fear and economic stagnation. I accept, he said, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. As the treaty was being formalized, something remarkable happened throughout human space. Weapons were cleaned one last time and put away. Scopes were carefully wrapped and stored. Men and women who had become legends of fear returned to being ordinary people living ordinary lives. Marcus Chen reopened his maintenance shop on Mining Station Omega-7. Sarah Williams went back to her Martian farm, where her vegetables were beginning to bloom. James Mitchell returned to ice fishing. Though now other retirees would occasionally ask him to tell the story of the war. He always declined, saying only, "Some stories are better left untold." But the most profound change came from an unexpected source. The Galactic University of Xenological Studies, the most prestigious institution in known space, announced a new course. Human Patience. A study in asymmetric warfare. The professor was Dr. Kelesh, a Rigelian who had spent decades studying human culture. To understand human snipers, he told his packed classroom, you must first understand human hunting. For millions of years before they achieved spaceflight, humans were persistence hunters. They would wound prey and follow it for days, never rushing, never stopping, until the animal collapsed from exhaustion. This patience, this ability to wait for the perfect moment, became encoded in their very DNA. A Zephrosian student raised an appendage. But Professor, many species evolved from hunters. What makes humans different? Dr. Kelesh clicked his beak in what passed for a smile among his species. Other species hunt with strength or speed or numbers. Humans hunt with time. They turned, waiting into a weapon. A human sniper isn't just a warrior with a long-range weapon. They're the embodiment of their species' fundamental nature. Patient, persistent, and absolutely certain that the perfect shot will eventually present itself. The course materials included case studies that made the students' various appendages tremble. The sniper of Ganymede, who held off an entire Andromedan army for 6 weeks with 17 bullets. She saved the rest, just in case. The ghost of Titan Station, who was never seen but left 47 dead pirates over the course of a year. Each had been killed by a single shot to their species equivalent of the third vertebra. But perhaps the most chilling lesson came from studying the aftermath of the war. The Galactic Empire's intelligence services estimated that humanity had deployed between 3,000 and 5,000 snipers during the conflict. Human records, declassified years later, revealed the actual number: 431. Less than 500 humans had brought an empire of trillions to its knees. The psychological impact rippled across the galaxy. Species that had considered attacking humanity quietly shelved their plans. Pirates avoided human shipping lanes. Even in bar fights, beings would carefully check if their opponent was human before throwing the first punch. The universe's #1 rule had been written in the fear of a million warriors who had faced an enemy they couldn't see, couldn't catch, and couldn't understand. But there was a deeper truth that only a few understood. Admiral Chen, in her retirement speech, put it best. The greatest victory of our snipers wasn't the enemies they killed. It was the wars they prevented. Every species that reads the rule and decides not to test it, every empire that chooses diplomacy over invasion, every pirate that picks a different target, those are the true victories. A sniper's greatest shot is the one they never have to take. 10 years after the treaty, a young Zephrosian warrior named Krexjan stood guard at a diplomatic function. He watched Ambassador Pierce chatting with various dignitaries, looking like nothing more than a grandmother enjoying a party. His training told him she was harmless. His instincts screamed danger. During a quiet moment, he approached her. "Ambassador, may I ask you something?" She smiled warmly. "Of course, dear. Were you really one of them? A sniper?" Her eyes twinkled with hidden memories. "What makes you think that?" "The way you stand. Always with clear sightlines to every exit. The way your eyes track movement without seeming to. The way beings unconsciously give you space without knowing why." Ambassador Pierce laughed, a genuine sound of delight. "You're very observant." "Yes, I was. A long time ago." "How many?" he asked, then quickly added, "If you don't mind me asking." She considered for a moment. "Enough to end wars. Not enough to start them. That's the balance every sniper learns. Could you teach me?" The question surprised even Krexjan himself. Why would a Zephrosian warrior want to learn human sniping? "Because," he said slowly, "I've realized that true strength isn't in the weapon you carry or the armor you wear. It's in the patience to wait for the right moment, and the wisdom to know when that moment arrives." Ambassador Pierce studied him for a long moment. "The first lesson is the hardest. Can you spend a day doing absolutely nothing but watching?" "A day, that's all?" She smiled again. But this time it was the smile of a predator, remembering the hunt. "Oh, my dear," I said, "start with a day. The real training begins when you can wait, a week, a month, a year. When you can sit so still that birds nest in your hair. When you can slow your heartbeat until medical scanners think you're dead. When you can look through a scope for so long that you forget which eye is yours and which belongs to the rifle." Krexjan shuddered despite himself. "And humans do this willingly? Not just willingly, eagerly. There's something in our nature that finds peace in the wait, satisfaction in the perfect shot, art in the patient hunt." She paused. "But perhaps that's enough philosophy for one evening. Enjoy the party, young warrior, and remember the rule." As she walked away, Krexjan found himself unconsciously checking the exits, noting sightlines, calculating angles. He stopped himself with a start. Just being near her for 5 minutes had changed how he saw the world. The universe's #1 rule wasn't just about avoiding conflict with human snipers. It was about recognizing that some forms of warfare were so fundamentally different, so utterly alien to conventional military thinking, that the only winning move was not to play. In a secure facility on Earth, the Silent Brotherhood held their annual gathering. It was the only time they all came together. farmers and teachers, doctors and mechanics, young and old, united by their shared skill and the secret history they'd written. Marcus Chen stood before them, older now, but still sharp-eyed. Brothers and sisters, we gather not to celebrate war, but to honor peace. Every day that passes without our rifles speaking is a victory. Every treaty signed because of what we might do is better than any battle we could win. Sarah Williams raised her glass. To patience. To patience, 500 voices replied. They talked through the night, sharing stories not of kills but of lives returned to normal. Lee Joe spoke of a student who just won an engineering scholarship. James Mitchell laughed about a fish that got away. They were ordinary people who had done extraordinary things and then chosen to become ordinary again. That was perhaps the most terrifying thing about human snipers. They weren't a separate warrior caste or elite units that could be identified and countered. They were scattered throughout humanity. Invisible until needed, patient as stones until the moment came to act. The Galactic Empire of Zephyros had learned this lesson in blood and fear. They'd written it into their history, carved it into monuments, programmed it into the base code of their military AI systems. Never fight the human sniper. But the deepest lesson, the one that only the wisest understood, was that the rule existed not because human snipers were invincible. They could be killed, captured, defeated like any warrior. The rule existed because fighting them meant fighting human nature itself. That patient, persistent, predatory core that had carried the species from the African savanna to the stars. Other species had evolved past their predatory instincts, becoming civilized, sophisticated, safe. Humans had done something far more terrifying. They'd refined those instincts, wrapped them in technology and training, and created warriors who embodied the ancient hunt in its purest form. The universe's #1 rule would endure because it spoke to a fundamental truth. Some victories cost more than defeat, and some enemies are better left unchallenged. The Galactic Empire of Zephyros had ignored this wisdom and paid the price in fear that would last generations. In the end, they were lucky. Humanity had chosen to teach rather than destroy, to demonstrate rather than devastate. The next empire might not be so fortunate. The rule existed. The snipers waited, and somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, crosshairs drifted across the void, patient as death, certain as gravity, waiting for someone else to forget the universe's #1 rule. The war was over. The peace was watched through a scope. And in classrooms across the galaxy, young officers learned the most important lesson of their careers. Never fight the human sniper, because in the end, you weren't fighting a soldier. You were fighting evolution itself, refined to a terrible purpose and aimed directly at your fears. The Galactic Empire of Zephyros had been the latest to learn this lesson. History suggested they wouldn't be the last.